The air in the First Congregational Church of Greenwich, Connecticut, was thick and sweet, saturated by the oppressive perfume of thousands of white lilies. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a spectacle, a meticulously orchestrated display of fortune, influence, and the strategic merging of two industrial dynasties, the Santa Cruz and the Olivares. Every detail, from the antique lace stitched into my gown to the guest list, screamed inherited privilege and futures, charted along predetermined lines. Sunlight, filtered and softened by stained glass windows, painted ethereal mosaics on the polished marble floor. It illuminated rows of faces, the genuinely happy, the subtly envious, the merely curious, and the calculating. I felt the collective weight of their gazes upon me as I walked down the central aisle, which felt interminable. My heart beat a chaotic rhythm. My father was gone, so I walked alone, my hand resting lightly on my uncle's arm, a gesture for appearance. The train of my gown, a stunning creation of ivory duchesse satin and intricate French Alençon lace, flowed behind me like an opulent waterfall, designed to elicit admiration and envy. It was heavy, a physical manifestation of the weight of expectation. This was my moment, the culmination of a lifetime shaped for this role, the final step into a perfect life with Christopher Olivares. Christopher waited at the altar, a figure of classic elegance in his perfectly tailored black tuxedo. He looked every bit the capable heir, the perfect counterpart. But as I drew closer, the subtle tension in his shoulders, the slight rigidity, caught my eye. His gaze was fixed straight ahead, not meeting mine with the shared smile I had envisioned. Instead, his eyes seemed distant, focused on something unseen. A faint, cold sense of unease began to coil in my stomach. I quickly dismissed it, attributing it to inevitable nerves. When I finally reached his side, the air around the altar seemed to thicken. He turned and took my hand. His skin was cool, his grip strangely hesitant. The priest's voice, calm and resonant, began the sacred liturgy. We moved through the traditional sequence: readings, prayers, exchange of rings, recitation of vows. It all felt strangely surreal, as though I were a detached observer of my own body. The immense weight of the moment pressed down upon me. Then came the pivotal question. The priest turned to Christopher. "Christopher, do you take Eleanor to be your lawfully wedded wife? Till death do you part?" A silence descended upon the vast cathedral. Not the planned, reverent silence, but a sudden, sharp absence of sound that felt heavy, suffocating, and profoundly wrong. It was a silence that screamed louder than any noise. Christopher did not answer. He simply stood there, his hand still holding mine loosely. But his eyes were distant, fixed on something internal. The priest paused, his brow furrowing. He prompted gently, "Christopher?" Finally, slowly, as if breaking free from a trance, he turned his head and looked directly at me. His eyes, usually warm, were now cold, blank, filled with a deep confusion and a raw pain I couldn't comprehend. There was no hint of love, only a dark, troubled depth that sent an icy shiver down my spine. "I can't," he said, his voice barely a whisper, a fragile thread of sound against the absolute, stunned silence. Yet, those two devastating words carried with horrifying clarity to every person present. My breath hitched painfully. My mind reeled. "What?" I managed to choke out, a desperate plea. "I can't marry you, Eleanor," he repeated, his voice gaining a fragile, trembling strength. He slowly, deliberately withdrew his hand from mine, the loss of physical contact a jarring shock. He took a small step back. I found things out. Things about you. Things that make all of this, impossible. Confusion, sharp and disorienting, followed by a cold dread, flooded my mind. "What are you talking about, Christopher?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "What things? What could possibly make you say this now, here, in front of everyone? What lies have you been told?" Before he could offer any explanation, a voice, sharp, theatrical, and laden with chillingly false sorrow, cut through the silence. Victoria Olivares, Christopher's cousin, a woman who had always regarded me with thinly veiled animosity, rose dramatically from her seat. She was dressed in a garish emerald green dress, deliberately chosen to clash. Her face was contorted in a theatrical expression of sorrow. "I am truly heartbroken to have to do this, especially on such a sacred day," Victoria announced to the now murmuring crowd, her voice perfectly calibrated to carry, laced with feigned sincerity. "But Christopher deserves to know the absolute truth before he makes such a sacred, lifelong vow. And frankly, everyone here, these esteemed families, this entire community, they deserve to know the truth about the woman standing at this altar. The truth about Eleanor Santa Cruz." With a dramatic flourish, she held up her smartphone. On the screen were blurred images, candid shots of me with a man who was not Christopher. It was Mark Jenkins, an old friend I'd hugged goodbye at a recent gala. The photos were clearly cropped and presented to suggest infidelity. "These were sent anonymously to Christopher this morning," Victoria declared, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Undeniable proof of Eleanor's duplicity, her infidelity. While planning her wedding to Christopher, she was secretly involved with another man. A collective gasp swept through the vast cathedral. Murmuring swelled instantly, a wave of shock and judgment. My face burned with heat, then went ice cold. Blood drained from my body. My world was ripped away, piece by agonizing piece. That's not what it looks like. It's a lie. "It's a setup," I cried, turning desperately to Christopher, tears blurring my vision. "Christopher, you know me. You know Mark is just an old friend. That was a goodbye hug at a public event. Victoria is lying. She's always hated me. Don't you see what she's doing?" He looked from the blurred, damning photos on Victoria's phone to my face, contorted in distress. His face was pale, a mask of shock and doubt. The warmth, the familiarity, the trust I had always seen in his eyes were absent, replaced by confusion and a terrible, dawning certainty that was not in my favor. "Eleanor, the pictures," he began, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "They speak for themselves, and the timing, receiving these just hours before the ceremony, it's damning. The timing was deliberate. She planned this. She sent them herself," I pleaded, my voice rising with hysteria, reaching out a trembling hand towards him. But he was already turning away, physically and emotionally retreating. "I'm sorry, Eleanor," he said, his voice barely audible, a final, crushing blow. I can't do this, not now. Not ever." He turned fully away from me and walked slowly from the altar, down the steps, past the stunned priest, past his gloating cousin, towards the side exit of the church. He didn't look back. The silence returned, heavy with the weight of hundreds of witnesses holding their breath. Then, the murmuring started again, louder this time, fueled by shock and scandal. Hundreds of guests stared at me, standing alone at the altar in my ruined wedding gown. The thousands of white lilies suddenly seemed grotesque, their sweet perfume suffocating. The humiliation was absolute, complete, and public. My carefully constructed world imploded in an instant. Whispers started again. Cruel commentary carried on the silent air. Such a scandal. I always suspected something wasn't quite right with her. Poor Christopher. Imagine finding out like that. No one spoke of poor Eleanor. My uncle, his face ashen, rushed forward and gently took my arm. "Eleanor," he murmured, his voice low and urgent. "We need to go. Now. Before the press descends." I nodded numbly, my mind a chaotic mess of pain and disbelief. I turned and began the long walk back down the central aisle, a gauntlet of staring eyes and whispered judgments. Each step was an agony, each whisper a stab. As I reached the back of the church, I saw Victoria standing near the entrance. Her face was a picture of false distress, a performance for the remaining guests, but her eyes met mine across the distance, and a flicker of pure, unadulterated triumph glinted there. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that she was responsible. It ignited a cold, fierce desire for justice, a spark of defiance in the ashes of my humiliation. My uncle hurried me out a side door, past a phalanx of photographers and reporters who had somehow already arrived. Their flashes exploded around me like bombs. I shielded my face with my hands, but it was useless. The images of the disgraced bride, fleeing her own ruined wedding, would be everywhere within hours. We got into the waiting car. The door slammed shut, sealing me inside with my humiliation, my grief, and my nascent rage. I was shaking uncontrollably. Tears streamed down my face, silent and hot. My uncle tried to comfort me, stroking my hand, murmuring soothing words, but his voice was distant, muffled by the roaring in my ears. As the car pulled away from the curb, leaving the grand church and the shattered remnants of my life behind, I looked out the window. The world I knew was gone. The humiliation was a physical ache, a burning brand on my soul. But beneath it, a cold spark of resolution flickered to life. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had won. They were wrong. The following days were a blur of pain, isolation, and the suffocating weight of scandal. The mansion felt like a gilded cage, every room a painful reminder of a future lost. Whispers followed me down the halls, carried on the breath of the staff. The public narrative, fueled by gleeful media coverage, was brutal. The disgraced heiress, her betrayal exposed on her wedding day. Victoria played the role of the heartbroken relative, forced to reveal a terrible truth. Christopher remained silent, his absence a constant, aching wound. I spent hours in my opulent bedroom, the very room where I had dreamed of my married life, now a painful reminder of a future that would never be. I looked at the stacks of unopened wedding presents, mocking artifacts of a life that had vanished. Grief was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. There were moments, dark moments, when I wanted nothing more than to disappear, to cease to exist. But then, anger surged, hot and fierce. Anger at Victoria's calculated cruelty, at Christopher's weak capitulation, at the world's swift and brutal judgment. And beneath the anger, a hard, cold core of defiance began to solidify. I would not let them win. I would not let this be the end of my story. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to pick up the pieces. It started with small things: getting out of bed, taking a shower, eating a meal. Then, I began to think, to plan. The life I had been born into was gone. The future that had been mapped out for me was destroyed. But that didn't mean my life was over. It meant I had to build a new one, a life on my own terms. The first step was leaving Greenwich. I couldn't stay in a place that held so many painful memories. A place where every face was a reminder of my humiliation. I made arrangements discreetly, without drawing attention. I liquidated the few personal assets I could access without raising suspicion. Some jewelry, a small trust fund my grandmother had set up for me years ago. It was a pittance compared to the fortune I had walked away from, but it was enough to start somewhere else, far away. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even my uncle. I needed a clean break, a complete disappearance from the world that had rejected me so spectacularly. I chose a distant city, a place where I knew no one, a place where the name Santa Cruz meant nothing, or at least, where the scandal hadn't penetrated. It was a bustling, anonymous metropolis, a place where I could blend in, disappear into the crowd. My first apartment was small, cramped, and a far cry from the spacious rooms of the mansion. But it was mine. For the first time in my life, I was truly on my own, responsible for myself in a way I had never been before. The initial months were incredibly difficult. The anonymity I craved also brought a profound loneliness. I missed the familiar routines, the comfort of knowing my place in the world, even if that place had been defined by others. I had to learn everything from scratch: how to use public transportation, how to cook for myself on a budget, how to manage my finances without a team of accountants. The skills I had been taught, etiquette, manners, how to host a lavish party, how to make small talk with dignitaries, were utterly useless in this new reality. I needed a job. Finding one was harder than I anticipated. My resume, filled with prestigious schools, philanthropic work, and society events, was met with skeptical glances, even outright amusement. What could someone like me possibly know about working for a living, about the real world? I started at the bottom, taking a job as a waitress in a busy, noisy diner. The work was physically demanding, the hours long and exhausting, the pay low. But there was a strange, deep satisfaction in it. In earning my own money, in being judged solely on my ability to carry trays and handle demanding customers, not on my name or my background. I worked hard, saving every penny I could. I picked up extra shifts whenever they were available, learned to live frugally, making my small earnings stretch. I was exhausted most of the time, my feet aching, my body weary, but for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of purpose, a sense of building something with my own hands, my own effort. I moved from the diner to a retail job in a department store, then to a position as an administrative assistant in a small non-profit office. Each step was small, the progress slow, but it was forward. As I worked and saved, I also began to think about what I truly wanted to do, what kind of life I wanted to build. The idea of second chances began to take shape in my mind. I had been given a forced second chance, a brutal opportunity to rebuild my life from nothing. I wanted to help others who needed the same, who had faced setbacks or made mistakes and were struggling to find their way back, to get back on their feet. I started volunteering at a local homeless shelter on my days off, then at a program that helped formerly incarcerated individuals find employment and reintegrate into society. I heard their stories. I heard about the systemic barriers they faced, the judgment and lack of opportunity that kept them trapped in a cycle of poverty and despair. Their struggles resonated deeply with my own experience of being judged and dismissed based on a past I couldn't change, a narrative that had been imposed upon me by others. I realized that my own fall from grace, painful and humiliating as it was, had given me a unique perspective, an empathy I wouldn't have had otherwise. I understood, on a fundamental level, what it was like to be an outcast, to be seen as less than, to be denied opportunity, to have your past define your future in the eyes of the world. This understanding became the driving force behind Second Chances. It wasn't just a charity, it was a mission born from personal experience. I started small, using my meager savings to fund a pilot program. I rented a tiny, sparsely furnished office space in a less than glamorous part of the city, bought some old, refurbished computers, and began reaching out to people in need through community centers and shelters. I developed simple workshops on resume writing, interview skills, and basic financial literacy. I connected with local businesses, often small, independent ones, advocating for them to give people with challenging backgrounds a chance, to look beyond a criminal record or a history of homelessness. It was slow, difficult work. There were countless rejections, doors slammed in my face, moments of profound doubt, moments when the sheer weight of the task felt overwhelming. But there were also moments of profound reward. Seeing someone get their first job after years of searching, seeing them gain confidence, seeing them start to rebuild their lives, one small step at a time. These moments fueled me, kept me going when I wanted to give up. My name, Eleanor Santa Cruz, was still a liability in some circles, a reminder of scandal and a life I had left behind. So, for a long time, I operated quietly, letting the work speak for itself, letting the impact of the foundation define its value. But as Second Chances grew, as its reach expanded and its impact became undeniable, my name began to be associated not with scandal, but with purpose, with redemption, with tangible positive change. The public narrative, at least in the circles where the foundation operated, began to shift. The disgraced heiress became the philanthropist, the founder of Second Chances, a woman who had overcome adversity to help others. It wasn't a deliberate effort to rehabilitate my image. It was a natural consequence of focusing on something larger than myself, on building something positive and meaningful from the ashes of my past. Years turned into a decade. Second Chances grew beyond my wildest dreams. We opened branches in other cities, expanded our programs to include vocational training in various trades, mental health support, and housing assistance. We partnered with corporations, government agencies, and other nonprofits who saw the value and effectiveness of our work. I was constantly traveling, meeting with staff, visiting program participants, fundraising, and advocating for policy changes that would create more equitable opportunities. My life was demanding, filled with long hours and constant challenges, but it was also filled with a deep sense of satisfaction, a feeling that I was finally living a life of purpose, a life that mattered, a life that was truly mine. Financial success returned, not in the form of inherited wealth or a lavish lifestyle, but through hard work, smart investments I made with my earnings, and the growth of the foundation itself, which attracted significant donations and grants based on its proven impact. Money was no longer an abstract concept or a symbol of status. It was a resource, a tool to expand our reach, to help more people, to make a bigger impact. I used some of my earnings to purchase the vineyard in Napa. It wasn't an impulse buy. It was a deliberate choice to create a place of peace, a connection to the land, a tangible counterpoint to the intensity of running a national organization. The vineyard became more than just a refuge. It became an extension of the foundation's mission. We developed a viticulture training program, offering a unique opportunity for individuals seeking a new start to learn a skilled trade rooted in the land, in the cycle of growth and harvest. It was incredibly rewarding to see people who had faced significant challenges find purpose and dignity working in the vines, nurturing the growth, and contributing to something tangible and beautiful. Meeting Ben was another unexpected gift in this new life. He was everything Christopher wasn't. Grounded, authentic, kind, and completely unfazed by my past or my name or the public narrative that had once defined me. Our connection was slow, organic, rooted in shared values and a mutual respect for the land and the hard work it demanded. We talked about everything: the challenges of farming, the complexities of running a nonprofit, the lessons learned from our pasts, the hopes we had for the future. There was no pretense, no hidden agenda, just two people connecting on a deep, human level. He saw me, not the heiress, not the scandal, but the woman who had built a life from scratch. One evening, sitting on the porch of the farmhouse as the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows over the vineyard, Ben turned to me. "You've built something remarkable, Eleanor," he said, his voice quiet, sincere, filled with genuine admiration. "And not just the foundation, which is incredible, but this life, the life you've created for yourself. It takes incredible strength to do what you've done, to come back from where you were." "It didn't feel like strength at the time," I replied, a small smile playing on my lips, remembering the raw pain and despair. It felt like survival. Like I had no other choice but to keep putting one foot in front of the other. "Sometimes, survival is the strongest kind of strength," he said, reaching out to take my hand. His touch was warm, calloused from working the land, real. the kind that comes from being broken and choosing, deliberately choosing, to put yourself back together, piece by piece, with great effort and determination. His words resonated deeply. That was exactly what I had done. I had been shattered, publicly humiliated, stripped of everything I thought defined me, and I chose to put myself back together, not as the person I was expected to be, the perfect heiress, but as the person I was meant to be, a person defined by my own efforts, my own values, my own purpose. Our relationship grew, a quiet, steady presence in my life, a source of comfort and joy. It wasn't a dramatic romance, but a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and a deep appreciation for the simple things. The taste of the wine we produced, the smell of the earth after rain, the peace of the evenings on the porch. We walked the vineyard together, discussing the vines, the weather, the challenges and rewards of working the land. We cooked simple meals in the farmhouse kitchen, sharing stories and laughter. We supported each other's work, understanding the passion that drove us both. Looking back now at the woman who stood at the altar that day, heartbroken and utterly humiliated, I felt a pang of sadness for her, for the pain she endured, but also a profound sense of gratitude. That moment, as devastating and cruel as it was, had been the catalyst for everything that came after. It had stripped away the false layers of my life, the expectations, the predetermined path, forcing me to confront who I was at my core and what I truly valued. It had set me on a path I never would have chosen, a path that was infinitely harder, but ultimately led to a life of purpose, meaning genuine connection, and a quiet, deep happiness I never could have found in the gilded cage I was meant to inhabit. I returned, not to the world that had rejected and humiliated me, but to a new world I had built myself, brick by brick, with my own hands and my own resilience. I was no longer the disgraced heiress, the subject of scandal. I was Eleanor, founder of Second Chances, owner of a thriving vineyard, partner to a good man, and most importantly, the owner of my own life, my own destiny. The humiliation didn't break me. It forged me into something stronger, something truer. The fall wasn't the end. It was the beginning of my real life. The greatest victory wasn't regaining my status or fortune in the eyes of the world, but building a life that was authentically mine, rich not in inherited wealth, but in purpose, resilience, love, and the quiet joy of truly belonging, not to a family name or a social class, but to myself and to the life I had created. The small, rented office space smelled faintly of stale coffee and desperation, a stark contrast to the polished mahogany and hushed tones of the corporate world I'd left behind. But it was mine. Every worn desk, every flickering fluorescent light, represented a step taken under my own power. This was where Second Chances began, not with a grand launch or a press conference, but with a handful of passionate volunteers, a borrowed computer, and my own relentless drive fueled by the ashes of my former life. I threw myself into the work with a ferocity born of necessity and a burning need to prove not just to the world, but to myself, that I was more than a name, more than a social standing. The skills I'd acquired through years of observing my father and uncle navigate the complexities of business, the sharp analytical mind honed by elite education, these were my tools now. I learned grant writing, navigated bureaucratic hurdles, built relationships with community leaders, and, most importantly, listened. I listened to the stories of those who had been marginalized, overlooked, or broken by circumstance, the formerly incarcerated, the long-term unemployed, the young people struggling to find their path. Their resilience, their quiet hope, became my inspiration. The initial days were a grind. Funding was scarce, setbacks were frequent, and the whispers of my past humiliation sometimes felt like a physical weight. There were moments of doubt, late nights staring at spreadsheets, wondering if I was foolish to trade a life of effortless comfort for this uphill battle. But then I would receive a thank you note, see a program participant land a job, or witness the spark of hope reignited in someone's eyes. And the purpose would surge back, stronger than the doubt. Slowly, painstakingly, second chances began to grow. Our job training programs achieved remarkable success rates. Our housing initiatives provided stable foundations for families rebuilding their lives. Our youth mentorship programs guided young people away from the pitfalls that had ensnared others. We weren't just providing services. We were restoring dignity, rebuilding confidence, and offering tangible pathways to a better future. Recognition followed, not the fawning attention of the society pages, but the quiet respect of those who saw the real impact we were making. Local news outlets ran positive stories. Other nonprofits sought partnerships. Philanthropists, drawn by our results and transparent operations, began to contribute. I wasn't just Eleanor Santa Cruz, the disgraced heiress. I was Eleanor, the visionary behind Second Chances, a force for good, a builder of hope. My intelligence, my resilience, my unwavering belief in the potential of every individual, regardless of their past, were finally being recognized for their true value. Years passed, marked not by social seasons or lavish galas, but by milestones achieved. The opening of a new community center, the expansion of a training program, the thousands of lives touched and transformed by Second Chances. The foundation had grown into a nationally recognized organization, a testament to the power of purpose and the dedication of countless individuals who believed in our mission. I was no longer just the founder. I was a respected leader in the philanthropic world, invited to speak at conferences, consulted on policy, my voice carrying weight and authority earned through tireless work and proven results. The world I had left behind felt distant now, a fading photograph of a life that was never truly mine. Yet, sometimes, glimpses would surface. News articles, overheard conversations, the quiet hum of the grapevine that still connected the upper echelons of society. Victoria Olivares, the architect of my public downfall, had, predictably, not fared well. Her moment of cruel triumph at the altar had been the peak of her influence, a fleeting, malicious victory. Without any real substance or talent to back it up, her penchant for drama and manipulation proved to be her undoing. Business ventures she attempted crumbled due to poor judgment and a lack of integrity. Her cutting remarks and self-serving behavior alienated even her most tolerant acquaintances. The glittering social circle that had once indulged her antics eventually grew weary of her toxicity. She became a pariah, her name synonymous with scandal and failure, but without the morbid fascination that had once surrounded mine. The last I heard, she was living a solitary, reduced existence. Her fortune dwindled, her days filled with little more than bitter regrets and the faded memories of a time when she believed she held power over others. There was no satisfaction in this knowledge, only a quiet understanding of the inevitable consequences of a life built on malice and superficiality. Her misery was her own making. Christopher's path had been quieter, more introspective. The public spectacle of our non-wedding, the exposure of his own indecisiveness and susceptibility to manipulation, seemed to have profoundly shaken him. He retreated from the public eye, eventually stepping away from the family business entirely. The pressure of the Olivars' legacy, the constant scrutiny, proved too much for a man who, I now understood, lacked the inner fortitude to navigate such a world. Rumors filtered back over the years. He had moved to a small, unassuming town, taken a modest job, seeking anonymity and a simpler life. I imagined him finding a measure of peace away from the relentless expectations, a quiet existence far removed from the gilded cage that had once been his destiny. I felt no anger towards him anymore, only a faint, lingering sadness for the man he could have been, the man who couldn't stand by the truth when it mattered most. Their fates were not a result of my actions, but the natural unfolding of lives lived according to their own choices and character. My reconquest was not of a world that had rejected me, but of myself, my own power and purpose, independent of their approval or disapproval. The true heart of second chances pulsed not within the walls of my office, but in the community centers, the workshops, the transitional housing facilities, and the job sites where our programs operated. I made it a priority to visit these places regularly, to sit and talk with the people whose lives we touched. These interactions were the antidote to the endless meetings and administrative tasks, the grounding force that reminded me why I had embarked on this journey. I remember one visit to a youth center we supported. A shy teenager, hesitant at first, showed me a resume he had created in our workshop. His eyes, previously downcast, were now filled with a tentative hope. He spoke of wanting to be a mechanic, a dream that felt within reach now. Another time, an older woman, recently released from prison, shared how our housing assistants had given her a safe place to rebuild her life, to reconnect with her estranged daughter. She held my hand, her grip surprisingly strong, and tears welled in her eyes as she simply said, "You gave me my life back." In these moments, the pain of my past, the public shame, the lost fortune, it all faded into insignificance. This was the true wealth, the immeasurable value of human connection and restored dignity. One quiet afternoon, sorting through old boxes in storage, I came across the remnants of my past life, photographs, invitations, and a velvet box containing the jewelry I was meant to wear on my wedding day. The diamond necklace, the pearl earrings, the elaborate bracelet, symbols of a life I was groomed for, a life that had shattered so spectacularly. Holding them now, they felt alien, heavy with the weight of a past that no longer defined me. They were beautiful, valuable in the world's eyes, but held no personal meaning for the woman I had become. An idea sparked. These jewels, once symbols of a failed union and public shame, could become instruments of hope. I decided to auction them, quietly and discreetly, with all proceeds going directly to second chances. It was a symbolic act of liberation, a final cutting of ties to a past that had tried to break me. The auction raised a significant sum, funding new programs and reaching even more people. The jewels were transformed from painful relics into tools for building new futures. Amidst the intensity of running a national nonprofit, I yearned for a place of quiet refuge, a connection to something fundamental and enduring. The vineyard in Napa, which I had purchased years prior, became that place. It was a world away from boardrooms and city streets, a place where the rhythm of life was dictated by the seasons, by the sun and the soil. Walking among the vines, feeling the earth beneath my feet, breathing in the scent of the grapes, brought a profound sense of peace. It was a reminder of resilience, of growth, of the beauty that can emerge from patient cultivation. It also became a natural extension of the Second Chances mission. We developed a viticulture training program, partnering with local vineyards to offer hands-on experience and skills to individuals seeking a new start. Seeing people who had faced hardship find purpose and pride in working the land, in nurturing something to life, was incredibly rewarding. The vineyard wasn't just a personal sanctuary, it was a living embodiment of the second chances we offered. The late afternoon sun cast a golden light over the rolling hills of the Napa Valley vineyard. I was walking the rows of Cabernet Sauvignon vines, discussing the recent harvest with Ben, the vineyard manager. He was a man of the earth, his hands strong and calloused, his face weathered by sun and wind, his eyes clear and kind. He had worked this land for decades, his knowledge deep and intuitive. Our conversations began with the vineyard, the soil, the climate, the challenges of organic farming, but they quickly branched out to encompass life, resilience, and the quiet strength it takes to rebuild. He knew my story, not from the headlines, but from the people in the valley, from the reputation of second chances, and the work we were doing with the viticulture program. He saw the woman behind the story, the one who wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty, who spoke with genuine passion about giving people a chance. "This land," he said, gesturing to the vines heavy with ripening grapes, "it teaches you patience. It teaches you that even after a hard winter, with the right care, life finds a way to come back, stronger." His words resonated deeply. My life had been a hard winter, a period of stripping away, but with effort and purpose, I had found a way to come back. "It also teaches you that you can't control everything," I replied, thinking of the unpredictable nature of both farming and life. "You do your best, you prepare, but sometimes things happen that are beyond your control. The key is how you adapt, how you keep going." He smiled, a slow, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "You've learned that lesson well, Eleanor. You didn't just adapt, you thrived. You took something broken and made it beautiful, not just out here." He gestured around the vineyard, "but in the lives you've touched." There was no pretense with Ben, no hidden agenda, no interest in my past status. He saw the woman I was now, the woman I had fought to become. Our connection was quiet, steady, built on shared values and a mutual respect for the hard work of building something meaningful, whether it was a thriving vineyard or a life of purpose. One evening, sitting on the porch as the stars began to appear, he took my hand. It felt natural, right? "You've built something remarkable," he said again, the sincerity in his voice unwavering. "A life that is truly yours." Looking back, the journey had been long and arduous, marked by pain, loss, and profound humiliation. But it had also been a journey of discovery, of resilience, of finding a strength I never knew I possessed. The scars remained, reminders of where I had been, but they were no longer sources of shame. They were badges of honor, proof of my capacity to endure, to rebuild, to thrive. My true legacy was not the Santa Cruz name or the fortune I had walked away from. It was second chances, the lives transformed, the hope rekindled. It was the vineyard, a place of peace and opportunity. It was the quiet, authentic life I had built, grounded in purpose and genuine connection. If you enjoyed the story, please give it a like, share it with someone special, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Tell me in the comments, what have you learned from my journey? See you soon with more stories that touch the soul.